The morning sky over Earth was unusually clear, a soft blue stretching over the sprawling cities below. On the bridge of the starship horizon the air was quiet, almost too quiet. Outside the massive windows, satellites and distant planetary colonies floated like tiny jewels, connected by the faint glow of communications beams. Commander Alice Trent stood straight, her hands lightly resting on the polished railing before her, her eyes fixed on the incoming message that had just pinged the ship's main console. She had waited for this moment for a long time, though she hadn't fully realized it until now. The message was from the Galactic Council, the ruling alliance of countless star systems and species. It was formal, cold, and blunt. Humanity was officially at war. The words hung in the air as if the room itself were holding its breath. Alice read it once, twice, then out loud to her officers, her voice calm but carrying the weight of the news. "Attention all officers," she said. "The Council has declared war against humanity. This is official. Effective immediately." Her words were met with silence. The young lieutenant, Nina Gray, shifted uncomfortably, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Commander," she said hesitantly, do we fight now? Should we prepare the fleets?" Alice turned her gaze toward Nina. There was no panic in her expression, only a quiet resolve. She smiled, and it was a small, almost mischievous smile. "Finally," she said, letting the word hang in the air. "They've decided to show their hand." Nina blinked. "Finally? You're happy?" Alice nodded. "I'm happy because now everything is clear. For years they've been watching us, questioning us, wondering if we would break. Now they've made their choice. Now we know exactly where we stand." The officers looked at one another. There was confusion, fear, and a faint spark of excitement. They had trained for this moment, dreamed of it, and yet they hadn't expected the Council to act so openly. Alice turned back to the console, her hands hovering over the controls. She brought up a holographic display of the Council's fleet positions. Tiny symbols hovered in space, moving slowly along projected trajectories. Each one represented a massive ship, some large enough to hold entire cities, others specialized in communications, defense, or logistics. All of them were far superior in number and firepower to anything humanity could muster at this moment, or so the Council believed. But Alice knew better. Humanity had been preparing quietly for decades. They had not built their fleets to attack nor to conquer. They had built them to survive. They had trained their pilots to think, to plan, to move as one. They had studied the other species, learned their habits, predicted their strategies. And now the Council had forced their hand, given them the opportunity to act. Not because humanity was weak, but because humanity was clever. She looked around at her officers again. "We are not here to fight blindly," she said. "We are here to survive on our own terms. They may have the numbers, they may have the experience, but they do not have the human mind. They do not understand our patience, our planning, our will. And they never will." Lieutenant Gray swallowed hard. "But, Commander, what if they attack first?" Alice's smile widened, but it was still calm. "Then we wait. We watch. We let them make the mistakes they are certain we will make. Patience is our strongest weapon. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Nina replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "Good," Alice said. She turned toward the viewport, watching the tiny specks of light that were the Council ships. "They have underestimated us. They always do. They think we will panic, think we will strike first, think we will bow or surrender. But we will do nothing until the time is right." For a long moment, the bridge was silent again, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound. Each officer seemed to feel the weight of what was about to come. They were facing an enemy unlike any other, and yet they felt ready. Humanity had survived the impossible before. They had survived wars, famines, disasters, and internal strife. They had survived because they never gave up, because they never fought recklessly, because they always believed in one thing above all: choice. Alice walked slowly along the bridge, her boots clicking softly against the floor. She stopped beside a young communications officer named Liam Hayes, who was monitoring the incoming transmissions from the outer colonies. "Liam," she said quietly, "how is the civilian evacuation proceeding?" "Almost complete, Commander," he replied. "All colonies in sectors 6 through 12 have been safely moved. The rest are following our contingency plans. There haven't been any interruptions from Council forces yet, but they're moving closer to the inner systems." Alice nodded. "Good. Keep monitoring them. Every movement, every change in formation, they will reveal their intentions. And we will be ready." Liam looked at her with admiration. "I still can't believe this is happening. After everything, the Council declaring war?" Alice smiled softly. Believe it. It is happening. And now we act, not in anger, not in panic, but in control. Humanity has waited long enough for this moment. She moved to the center of the bridge, raising her hand slightly to gather attention. All officers, she said, her voice steady, carrying the quiet authority that had earned her respect across the fleet. Remember this, we do not fight to conquer. We do not fight to dominate. We fight because it is necessary. We fight because it is our choice. And above all, we fight because we know when to stand and when to walk away. The officers straightened, their fear replaced by a calm determination. They understood what Alice meant. This was not a reckless war of aggression. It was a measured response to a situation forced upon them. They would survive not by sheer strength but by intelligence, by unity, by patience. Outside the ship, the stars seemed indifferent, cold and distant. Yet within the bridge of the horizon, a spark of human defiance burned brightly. It was quiet, almost invisible, but unyielding. Humanity had faced the vast unknown before and had survived. They would survive this too. Alice turned back to the holographic display, studying the Council's fleet once more. Each movement, each formation told a story. They believed themselves unstoppable. They believed humanity would panic. But they had never known patience like this. They had never met humans who could wait decades, who could prepare silently while appearing ordinary, who could turn every disadvantage into a strategy. A soft beep from the console drew her attention. It was a report from the outer colonies. All civilian evacuations completed without incident. Not a single life lost, not a single ship damaged. The Council had thought to catch humanity unprepared, but humanity had been ready, always ready. Alice let herself smile again. Finally, she whispered under her breath, they have shown their hand. Now we know who they truly are. She looked at her officers one last time before the shift change. Their faces reflected a mix of awe and respect. Rest now, she said gently. But stay alert. This war is not about who strikes first. It is about who chooses wisely. And we will choose wisely. As she stepped into her private quarters, the words of an old mentor echoed in her mind. The greatest victories are those you do not need to fight for. The strongest warriors are the ones who know when not to fight. Alice Trent smiled again. For the first time in years, she felt the calm certainty of a leader who knew the path ahead. Humanity would survive. Humanity would endure. And when the time came, they would act, not recklessly, not in anger, but with precision and choice. The Council had declared war. And humanity had smiled, quietly, because they had been waiting for this moment all along. The Council had expected humans to panic. They had expected the fleets to charge forward immediately, weapons blazing, signals firing. They believed that when faced with superior numbers, humanity would rush into battle and crumble. But they had forgotten one thing: humans did not act according to fear. Humans acted according to reason, strategy, and patience. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, one of Earth's newest command ships. The room was filled with the quiet hum of energy cores and soft beeps from consoles tracking distant fleets. Outside, in the void of space, Council ships glided along their predicted paths, unaware that the humans they sought to destroy had already vanished from the systems they planned to occupy. Ethan leaned on the railing, watching the blips of light that represented thousands of Council ships. He could see them struggling to coordinate through the vast empty systems humanity had left behind. Let them tire themselves, he said softly, almost to himself. Then louder he added, we don't fight on their schedule. We fight on ours. The officers on the bridge glanced at him with curiosity. Lieutenant Mara Dean, who was monitoring navigation, tilted her head. Captain, they're moving faster than expected. Do you think they suspect anything? Ethan shook his head. No. They think we're panicking. They think we're running blindly. But we are not running blindly, Mara. We are controlling every movement. Every step they take we have anticipated. Every supply line, every path, every colony, they will stretch themselves thin before they realize it. Outside the ship, the void was silent, but it was a battlefield of shadows and strategy. Humanity's civilian fleet had vanished from sight, blending into asteroid fields, using stealth technology to hide from sensors. Colonies had been evacuated, with entire populations moving in perfect order along pre-planned escape routes. Every ship carried supplies, families, and essentials, yet none had been left behind. Not a single life had been lost. Captain Cole's second officer, Daniel Frost, was at the communications console, scanning for signals from the Council. Sir, he said, his voice low, they're still trying to locate the main human fleet. All our decoy signals are working. They've been scanning Sector 12 for 3 hours without any real result. Ethan smiled slightly. Good. Let them search. Let them worry. Let them think they're in control. That is the advantage of patience. They have made the first mistake by assuming we would panic. And now we watch. The Council fleets moved like predators through empty systems, wasting fuel and resources, trying to force a confrontation that would never come. Human ships were not chasing them, not attacking them, not even signaling their presence. The Endeavour and its sister ships were merely observers, ensuring the civilian population moved safely while the Council's forces struggled to understand the absence of resistance. In one of the smaller command rooms, Lieutenant Mara Dean tapped her fingers nervously on the console. Captain, isn't it risky? What if they find us before we're ready? What if they launch an attack? Ethan turned to her, his expression calm and reassuring. Mara, we are not hiding because we are afraid. We are hiding because we are prepared. Every fleet, every colony, every evacuation route is planned to perfection. If they attack us now, they will waste resources and lives trying to hit targets that don't exist. And when they finally realize that, they will be weaker. That is when we act. Mara nodded slowly, beginning to understand. It was not fear that guided human strategy. It was foresight, patience, and the refusal to be forced into a reaction. Humanity's strength had never been in numbers alone. It had been in their ability to think ahead, to adapt, to survive even when facing far superior forces. The bridge fell silent again as the crew watched the holographic display of the Council fleet. Thousands of ships, moving like a wave across the empty void, searching for something that wasn't there. And humanity was not there. They were elsewhere, always ahead, always prepared, always in control. Captain Cole walked slowly along the bridge, stopping beside Lieutenant Sophie Lane, who was monitoring life support systems for the civilian fleet. How are the evacuees? He asked. All safe, Sophie replied, a small smile on her face. We've rerouted the last convoy through the asteroid belt in Sector 9. No Council patrols detected. Families are settling into temporary habitats, and supplies are fully stocked. Everyone is accounted for. Ethan nodded. Excellent. Humanity is always strongest when we protect each other. That is why they cannot defeat us with brute force. They do not understand what it means to care for every life in the fleet. They only see numbers. They only see firepower. A young communications officer, Leo Park, spoke up nervously. Captain, they just sent a warning message. They said if humans do not surrender immediately, they will escalate attacks. They're clearly frustrated. Ethan smiled again. Good. Let them be frustrated. Let them make threats. Words mean nothing when actions are predictable and planned. We do not fight because they demand it. We fight because we choose to survive, and we will do it our way. Hours turned into days. Council fleets continued to move through the empty systems, wasting energy, resources, and patience. Human observers on ships like the Endeavour noted every movement, catalogued every mistake, and reported them back to the Central Command. Each report reinforced a simple truth. The Council had underestimated humans. They had assumed fear would dictate behavior. They had assumed chaos would follow the declaration of war. But humans did not panic. Humans adapted. Humans waited. In the mess hall, Captain Cole sat quietly with a cup of steaming tea. Lieutenant Mara Dean joined him, still tense from hours of observation. Do you ever get tired of waiting? She asked. Ethan shook his head. No. Waiting is part of the strategy. Waiting is a choice. Every hour they search for us, every mistake they make, brings us closer to the moment when we decide to act. And when we do, it will be on our terms, not theirs. Outside, in the darkness of space, the first faint glimmers of the human fleet's stealth maneuvers began. Convoys moved from hidden bases to new locations, taking advantage of unmonitored wormholes and sensor-blind spots. Every ship moved as part of a coordinated plan, though to an outside observer it would have seemed chaotic. But it was not chaos. It was human order, precise and deliberate. In one hidden command hub, Captain Cole received a report from Commander Alice Trent. She had been monitoring the overall strategy, guiding movements from multiple ships and colonies. Her message was brief but firm. Continue observing. Maintain patience. Do not engage. They will make the first mistake. Ethan relayed the instructions to his officers. You heard her. Watch, learn, and wait. Humanity has survived wars for centuries, not by attacking first but by acting wisely. That is what we do now. Weeks passed. The Council's fleets grew tired. Supply lines stretched thin. Communications between their ships became strained. The empty systems they had intended to occupy now felt like traps. They had anticipated a quick, decisive war, but human patience had turned the situation into a slow, exhausting struggle for them. On the bridge of the Endeavour, Ethan and his officers watched the Council ships from a distance. Each officer had a small smile. Not from triumph, not yet, but from understanding. They were witnessing history, the first human war of choice, fought without a single unnecessary battle, without a single rash decision. Lieutenant Mara Dean finally spoke, her voice quiet but full of realization. They don't understand us. They've never understood us. Ethan nodded. No, Mara. They never will. That is why patience is our weapon and wisdom is our shield. The moment we strike, it will not be chaos. It will be precision. And it will be on our terms. He looked out at the dark expanse of space, dotted with the scattered lights of enemy ships, and he felt a deep sense of pride. Humanity had not run, had not panicked, had not surrendered. They had adapted, moved intelligently, and forced the enemy to fight a war that they themselves had not chosen. And that, Ethan knew, was the true power of humans. Not strength, not numbers, not firepower. But patience, strategy, unity, and the unwavering choice to survive on their own terms. For the first time since the Council's declaration, Captain Ethan Cole allowed himself to relax slightly. Humanity was in control, not of the enemy but of themselves. And that control would be their greatest weapon in the days to come. In the silent bridge, as lights flickered and consoles hummed, Ethan whispered almost to himself, "Let them tire themselves. We wait. And when the time is right, we will show them what humanity truly is." The stars outside seemed calm, almost peaceful, as if the universe itself did not notice the tension building in the human colonies. Council ships moved slowly through the abandoned human worlds, their engines humming like restless predators. They believed that by occupying empty planets, they could force humanity into submission. They assumed that when humans saw their homes taken, they would panic, give in, or attack without thinking. But the Council had misunderstood. They had underestimated the patience, the planning, and the quiet cunning of humans. They had not realized that humanity did not fight because they were afraid of losing. Humanity fought when it chose to fight, and on its own terms. Lieutenant Clara Finch sat at her station aboard the Aurora, one of the smaller human command ships. She studied the latest reports on the Council's movements, her fingers tracing the flickering lights on the display. "They think it's a war," she said softly to herself, a small smile forming on her lips. "It's just patience." Her second-in-command, a young officer named Noah Blake, looked up from his console, curiosity and concern written across his face. "Patience? Clara, they've taken 3 of our outer colonies. They're in Sector 14 and Sector 15 is under occupation. Isn't that dangerous? Shouldn't we respond?" Clara shook her head, her smile widening just a little. "Dangerous? Perhaps. But responding now would be exactly what they expect. And we do not act on their expectations. Watch." She tapped the console, bringing up a map of supply lines, communications channels, and transport convoys. Tiny green dots blinked in complex patterns, representing human teams moving silently through systems, performing tasks too small for the Council to notice, but significant enough to disrupt their operations. "Noah, see these routes?" she said, pointing. "We've rerouted supplies through sectors they think are controlled. Communications are being subtly altered. Navigation data is being redirected. Every move they make is being slowed, confused, and complicated by humans they do not even see." Noah leaned closer, eyes widening. "So, we're not attacking. We're messing with them silently?" Clara nodded. "Exactly. This is the power of subtlety. While they occupy our worlds, we are making sure they cannot gain anything from it. They think they control the situation, but every system they enter becomes more confusing, more tangled. By the time they realize it, they will be exhausted. That is the pressure." Outside, in the abandoned colonies, small human teams worked tirelessly. On each planet, volunteers had set up devices that caused minor but persistent disruptions to Council sensors. Communications relays sent false signals. Cargo shipments appeared delayed or misplaced. Navigation beacons blinked inconsistently, creating phantom fleets that led the Council ships on wild chases. No lives were at risk, no weapons were fired. The humans were not attacking. They were reshaping the battlefield without ever firing a shot. Captain Ethan Cole watched the progress reports from his own ship, the Endeavour. He had coordinated many of these operations himself, ensuring that each disruption was perfectly timed. "Every system they occupy," he said to his officers, "becomes more difficult to manage. By the time they realize it, they will be tired, frustrated, and vulnerable. That is the advantage of patience. Lieutenant Clara Finch smiled again as she read the latest messages from the teams in the field. Sector 23, she said, they've rerouted 3 convoys, altered 4 sensor arrays, and created 2 phantom colonies. The Council has already wasted nearly 10 hours tracking imaginary targets. Noah shook his head in disbelief. 10 hours? All without a fight. Clara nodded. That's how humans fight sometimes. Not with weapons. With brains, with planning, with patience. They are learning the hard way that war is not always about combat. Sometimes it's about endurance, observation, and subtle influence. That is what the Council doesn't understand. In one of the empty colonies now occupied by Council forces, confusion was beginning to spread. Commanders of the enemy ships reported irregularities in communications and logistics. Supplies that should have arrived were missing. Ships sent to patrol specific zones reported phantom signals and strange navigational errors. They assumed sabotage, but they could not find the cause. From the human side, it was all deliberate, carefully executed by teams led by officers like Clara Finch. Each operation was small on its own, almost invisible, but together they formed a network of influence that frustrated the Council without a single violent confrontation. Clara's voice broke through the quiet hum of the bridge. Noah, send an update to Captain Cole. Make sure he knows every system we've affected in the past 24 hours. It's important he sees the full scope of what's happening. Noah typed quickly, sending the detailed report. Moments later, Cole's voice came over the comm. I've seen the updates. Excellent work, Clara. This is exactly what patience looks like. Keep going. Every system counts. Every error we induce costs them time, energy, and confidence. Let them think they are in control. That is how we win. Clara leaned back in her chair, her smile steady. It feels strange, doesn't it? Not firing a single shot and still feeling like we're winning. Ethan Cole's words echoed in her mind. Patience is our strongest weapon. Control is our greatest shield. In the Council Command Center, frustration was growing. High-ranking officials convened in panic, trying to understand why their superior numbers and advanced technology were not producing the expected results. Reports of missing supplies, confused fleets, and delayed communications filled their screens. They could not locate the human teams responsible. Every time they thought they had found them, they realized it was a false lead. Back on the Aurora, Clara Finch walked along the bridge, observing her crew. They moved with quiet precision, confident in their purpose. Every operator knew the importance of small actions, of subtle influence, of timing. Humanity had learned long ago that survival often depended on intelligence more than strength. Outside the ship, small unmanned drones moved through the sectors, monitoring enemy movements and creating diversions. A single drone would emit a false signal, suggesting a fleet where none existed. Another would mimic human communications, drawing Council forces away from real convoys. A human navigator, stationed on a hidden asteroid base, redirected supply lines through complex routes, ensuring that every Council attempt to gain control was slowed to a crawl. Lieutenant Clara Finch smiled as she read the latest reports from the field. They think this is a war, she said again. But it's not a war. It's a test of patience, a test of endurance, and they are failing. Noah Blake, standing beside her, shook his head in amazement. It's brilliant. We're controlling the fight without even fighting. Clara nodded. And that is what makes humans dangerous. Not because we always attack first. Not because we have the biggest fleets or the strongest weapons. But because we wait. We observe. We adapt. We make our opponents tire themselves while we remain calm, prepared, and ready. Hours turned into days and the Council's frustration grew. Each occupied world required resources to maintain control. Each fleet in motion consumed fuel and energy. Every disruption caused by small human teams forced them to reroute and recalculate. Their confidence was waning and confusion had taken root among their ranks. Clara Finch's team monitored everything, logging every mistake the Council made. Even minor errors were noted to be studied for future strategy. Humanity was learning from every move the Council made, anticipating every reaction, and using them against themselves without a single shot fired. One day, as Clara reviewed the latest field reports, she allowed herself a small laugh. Sector 27, she said, they've sent 5 ships to chase a phantom fleet. It doesn't exist, yet they're committed. Every hour they waste is a victory for us. Every move they make is exactly what we hoped for. Noah shook his head in disbelief. And they call this a war. They don't even know what war looks like for humans. Clara's eyes softened as she looked out at the stars. They will learn soon enough. But by then it may be too late. By then we will have already won without ever firing a single shot. The human strategy was working perfectly. Every occupied world became a trap of subtle confusion. Every council fleet was slowed, distracted, and frustrated. Humanity's patience had become their weapon, their intelligence their shield, and their quiet confidence their greatest strength. Clara Finch leaned back in her chair, reviewing the reports one last time before her shift ended. Every log, every update, every minor disruption added to the growing pile of evidence that the Council had underestimated humanity. They had believed that numbers and firepower would force submission. They had not counted on patience, planning, and subtle influence. As she prepared to leave the bridge, Clara whispered to herself, a small, confident smile on her face, "They think it's a war. But it's not a war. It's just patience. And patience always wins in the end." The council's chamber was vast, cold, and silent. Endless rows of metal seats surrounded a central dais where the most powerful leaders of countless species sat, their alien faces stern and unreadable. The air was thick with tension, like a storm waiting to break. Today was different. Today the council had captured a human diplomat. Not a soldier, not a commander, just one man, Milo Grant, who had been sent on a routine negotiation mission weeks earlier and had been caught in the middle of the growing conflict. The council had expected fear. They had expected anger. They had expected humanity to beg, to offer surrender, to plead for mercy in the face of overwhelming force. But Milo Grant was calm. His hands were folded on the polished table in front of him, and he looked at the council leaders without hesitation. His eyes were steady, his posture firm, and his voice carried a quiet authority that silenced the chamber immediately. "I understand why you are confused," Milo began, his tone measured and respectful, yet firm. "You see humans as reckless. You see us as aggressive because of our history, because of our wars, because of our failures. But you misunderstand us. Humans fight only when it matters." A murmur ran through the chamber. One of the council leaders, a tall, blue-skinned alien with glimmering eyes named Thaler, leaned forward. "Explain, human," Thaler demanded. "Do you mean to suggest that your species chooses battles? That you do not respond to our orders or our strength?" Milo nodded slightly. "Yes, that is exactly what I mean. Humans do not fight blindly. We do not fight simply because someone declares war against us. We fight because it is necessary. We fight when survival, freedom, and choice demand it. Everything else we endure quietly. Everything else we survive with patience." Another council member, a short, armored creature named Vekare, hissed. "Patience? You speak of patience while your fleets hide, your colonies disappear, and your people evade us at every turn. You are defiant. Is this your idea of negotiation?" Milo smiled faintly, but it was not arrogance. It was calm. "No, Vekare. It is not defiance. It is understanding. It is planning. It is knowing the value of action and inaction. Our strength does not always lie in weapons. It lies in choosing when not to fight, in understanding the consequences, in making sure that when we do act, our actions matter. That is what you have not yet understood." The council was silent. For the first time there was no talking, no whispering, no arguing. Milo's words hung in the air like a physical presence, settling into the minds of the leaders. They were forced to consider the possibility that humanity's strategy, its calm, its seemingly passive behavior, was not weakness, it was intelligence. Thaler's eyes narrowed. "You speak of strategy, human. Yet your ships avoid confrontation. Your colonies are abandoned. You hide from us. How is that strength?" Milo's gaze did not waver. Strength is not always in the front lines. Strength is in preparation, in observation, in ensuring that when the moment comes, we act decisively. You assumed our smile, the calm of Commander Alice Trent, was arrogance. You assumed that humans were reckless and would rush into battle at the first sign of danger. But that smile is confidence. Confidence in preparation, in knowledge, in the patience that allows us to survive where others would fail. Vekare hissed again, frustrated. "And you believe this patience will save you? That your people, scattered and hidden, will endure against our fleets?" Milo leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but sharp. "I do not believe it. I know it. Every step of your occupation, every move of your fleets, every attempt to control us has been anticipated. Every disruption in your plans, every wasted resource, every false signal, it has been planned by humans long before your declaration of war. You are not in control. You never were." The council murmured among themselves. Their faces for the first time reflected doubt. They had believed themselves supreme, unquestionable, the ultimate power in the galaxy. And yet, Milo Grant, one human, had forced them to see that their numbers and strength were irrelevant when faced with a species that acted with intelligence, patience, and unity. Milo continued, "Commander Alice Trent smiles not because she underestimates you, not because she is arrogant, but because she knows something you have not yet realized. You cannot force humans to fight on your schedule. You cannot demand that we act according to your expectations. We choose when and where we act. And that choice is our greatest strength." Thaler's hand twitched as he adjusted his robes, clearly unsettled. "You speak boldly, human. Do you think your words alone can sway us?" Milo shook his head. "No. Words are not enough. Action proves understanding. Observe the movements of our fleets. Watch how our colonies survive without confrontation. See how your own plans are delayed, confused, and strained. These are not accidents. These are not mistakes. They are deliberate, quiet actions by humans who understand that true power lies in choosing the fight that matters, and avoiding those that do not." A younger council member, unfamiliar with military strategy, asked nervously, "But why? Why do you not strike? Why do you not fight when declared war upon?" Milo's eyes softened. "Because strength without purpose is waste. Action without strategy is destruction. Humans have survived for millennia because we understand when to act and when to wait. We do not fight for pride, for fear, or for dominance. We fight for survival, for freedom, and for choice. Everything else, we endure quietly, and we prepare for the moments that truly matter." The council was silent again. This time it was different. The silence was heavy with reflection, with realization. Milo's words were not mere statements, they were truths the council could not deny. They had assumed human fear would dictate behavior, human panic would force mistakes. They had assumed arrogance and recklessness. And now they had been forced to confront the reality: humans acted differently. Humans fought differently. Humans won differently. Milo leaned back slightly, his voice calm and firm. "Commander Alice Trent smiles because she knows the truth. She knows that patience is not weakness. She knows that observation is not inaction. She knows that when humans act, we act decisively. And that is what you fail to understand. We do not need to attack immediately to survive. We do not need to fight blindly to endure. Our strength lies in understanding, in planning, and in the knowledge of when not to fight." The murmurs around the chamber grew quieter. The council leaders exchanged glances. Doubt flickered in their eyes, uncertainty crept into their voices. They had assumed humans were reactive. They had assumed humans were predictable. They had assumed humans would panic and make mistakes. Milo Grant, one diplomat, had shown them otherwise. Thaler finally leaned forward, his expression a mix of frustration and begrudging respect. "You speak as if humans are superior in patience and strategy. And yet you are just one man. How can your words represent your species?" Milo's gaze did not waver. "I'm not just one man. I speak as one, but I act as many. Humans are united in ways you do not yet see. Our fleets move as one, our colonies survive as one, and our strategy is executed across countless systems simultaneously. My words are small, but our actions are enormous. That is the difference you fail to see. We are not reckless. We are precise. We are not reactive. We are deliberate." The room fell into near silence. Even the council's most confident leaders could not deny the truth in Milo's words. The smile of Commander Alice Trent, which had seemed to some arrogance, now became clear. It was confidence. Confidence in preparation. Confidence in knowledge. Confidence in a species that knew when to fight and when to wait. Milo continued, softer now but still with unwavering certainty. "You may think this declaration of war has put us at a disadvantage. You may think that your fleets, your technology, and your numbers give you control. But you are wrong. Control is not given by force. Control is not taken by intimidation. Control is earned by understanding. And humans, we understand ourselves, we understand the universe, and we understand when the moment truly matters. That is why we survive. That is why we endure. And that is why, when the time comes, we will act decisively, and there will be no doubt that humanity's choice was right." The council remained silent, the weight of his words sinking in. They had underestimated humanity. They had assumed fear and rash action would define their enemy. They had not understood the quiet power of patience, planning, and restraint. They had not understood that the smile of a human commander was not pride, but certainty. Milo Grant stood slowly, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the chamber one last time. "I am not arrogant. I am not defiant. I am a human. And this is what humans do. We wait. We observe. We plan. We choose. That is our strength. That is why your fleets will tire themselves, why your plans will falter, and why, in the end, humanity will endure, not because of numbers, not because of strength, but because of understanding. The council members shifted uneasily in their seats. For the first time, doubt had entered their minds. The war they had declared seemed less certain. Their fleets moved, but now hesitation shadowed every decision. They realized that they were facing a species unlike any other, one that did not fight recklessly, one that did not panic, one that chose the battle worth fighting. Milo Grant was led away, still calm, still composed, still confident. And in the silence he left behind, the council could not help but feel the truth they had long ignored. The human smile, the calm demeanor, the patience, they were not signs of weakness. They were signs of a power the galaxy had never faced before. The council chamber was tense. Whispers ran through the seats like a quiet storm. For the first time since the war had been declared, doubt had begun to creep into the minds of the leaders. Some of them had started to question whether this war was truly necessary. Some wondered if they had underestimated humans, and some feared that their own positions of power might be weakened by the human approach to patience and strategy. In the vast emptiness of space, human fleets had been moving quietly for weeks. They had been hidden, unseen, unpredictable. But now they began to reappear. Not as an attack, not as a strike of vengeance, but with calm, deliberate purpose. Fleets glided into sectors that were neutral, sectors that had been caught in the tension between humans and the Council. Their mission was clear: protection, not conquest. Commander Alice Trent stood on the bridge of the horizon, her eyes scanning the holographic displays of neutral systems. Each system was dotted with colonies, trade stations, and research hubs, all belonging to species that had remained uninvolved in the conflict. They were vulnerable. They were exposed. And Alice knew that leaving them to the Council's control, or worse, leaving them to become collateral damage, was unacceptable. "Status report," she said, her voice calm but firm. Lieutenant Clara Finch, sitting at a nearby console, looked up. "All neutral systems within range are now being monitored. Human fleets are moving into defensive positions. No engagements reported. Civilians are safe. Supplies are being delivered." Alice nodded, her gaze steady. "Good. Let them see that we do not seek war, but we do act to protect. That is the difference between humans and others. We do not need to conquer to survive." In the council chamber, the murmurs grew louder. Some leaders whispered openly about the wisdom of ending the war. Others argued that humans must be defeated before they gain too much influence. Fractures began to form, subtle but growing. Members questioned not just the strategy but the morality of their aggression. A young council diplomat named Sherry Kay stood suddenly. "We declared war because humans were seen as a threat," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But now, they protect, not attack. They offer no demands. They seek no revenge. What kind of enemy behaves this way?" The chamber fell silent. Sherry Kay's words carried weight. Many leaders began to realize that they had misjudged humanity. Humans did not need to conquer. They did not need to dominate. They did not react with aggression to threats unless it was necessary. And that realization made the Council uneasy. On the horizon, Alice observed the positions of human fleets. Each ship moved in careful formations, covering trade routes, defending colonies, and assisting with emergencies in neutral systems. Human pilots worked in silence, precise and coordinated. No unnecessary risks were taken. No civilians were endangered. No retaliation was sought. It was a display of strength unlike any the galaxy had seen. Lieutenant Clara Finch tapped a console. "Commander, we've received messages from multiple neutral colonies. They are asking for our protection. They are grateful and some even offer support. Our presence is being welcomed, not feared." Alice allowed herself a faint smile. "That is exactly what we want, Clara. Humans do not need to conquer to demonstrate power. Protection is our statement. Understanding and choice are our weapons." Meanwhile, in the council chamber, debates became heated. Some species insisted on continuing the war, believing that humans must be forced to obey. Others argued that the humans' actions proved a point that could not be ignored. A species that did not need to conquer could not be beaten by force alone. Thaler, the blue-skinned leader, slammed a fist on the table. "We cannot allow this. Humans are manipulating perception. They have no need to fight, yet they control the narrative. If we back down, we will appear weak." Milo Grant, still present as an observer after his capture and release, spoke quietly to some council members. "They are not manipulating perception. They are demonstrating truth. Humans act with purpose. We do not need to dominate to survive. That is what the Council does not understand. That is why your fleets tire themselves and your plans falter. Some leaders began to nod slowly. Others frowned, resisting the thought. But the idea had taken root. Human strength did not lie in numbers, weapons, or aggression. It lay in choice, patience, and understanding. Back in space, human fleets continued their work. Trade routes were secured. Isolated colonies were assisted. Emergency supplies were delivered to systems affected by Council occupation. Every movement, every action was deliberate. Every choice reinforced the image of humanity as a species that did not fight for greed or revenge, but for survival, justice, and the protection of others. Captain Ethan Cole observed the operations from the Endeavour. He had coordinated much of the fleet's activity alongside Commander Alice. "They see us now," he said to Lieutenant Mara Dean. "Not as an enemy to crush but as a species to respect. That is more powerful than any weapon." Mara nodded. "And yet they continue to question. They still debate whether we are a threat. How long do you think it will take for the Council to truly understand?" Ethan smiled slightly. "It doesn't matter. We continue our work. Every system we protect, every life we save, every fleet we guide, these are actions they cannot ignore. Eventually they will see. And when they do, it will be clear, humans do not need to conquer to be powerful. That is our strength." In the Council chamber, the divisions grew. Some species quietly began to withdraw their forces from occupied human systems. Others hesitated, unsure of whether they should maintain aggressive stances. The human display of restraint and careful protection had created doubt and confusion. Lieutenant Clara Finch monitored incoming messages from Council representatives. "Commander, some members of the Council are requesting direct talks. They want to understand our terms. They ask for clarity. They are beginning to realize the scale of our patience and strategy." Alice Trent looked at the display. Her eyes were calm, confident. "Then it is time to speak. Send them our terms." Clara nodded, tapping the console. "The terms are simple, Commander. Recognition of human autonomy. No demands. No acts of revenge. Respect for our choices. That is it." Alice smiled faintly. "Exactly. Humans do not need to fight to survive. We do not need to conquer to demonstrate strength. And we will never seek to dominate those who choose not to fight. That is the principle the Council must understand." Messages were sent across the galaxy, reaching the Council leaders one by one. The terms were clear, simple, and uncompromising. There would be no retaliation. There would be no conquest. Humans only asked to be recognized for their autonomy and for their choice to live freely. Council leaders read the messages one after another. The chamber fell into a long, tense silence. For the first time, no one tried to argue, no one tried to respond with aggression. The simplicity and strength of humanity's terms were undeniable. A species that did not need to conquer could not be defeated. It was a lesson the Council had been slow to learn, but it was finally sinking in. Captain Ethan Cole watched the reports coming in from various Council systems. Ships were being withdrawn. Neutral colonies were safe. The pressure on the Council was growing from within, as species questioned the morality and strategy of continuing the war. Human fleets continued to act with restraint, protecting where needed, assisting where possible, and never seeking conflict unless unavoidable. Lieutenant Mara Dean smiled. "They finally see it, don't they?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "Yes. They see what humans always understood. We do not need to conquer to survive. We do not need to dominate to be strong. Our power comes from our choices, our patience, and our unity. And when a species can do that, no army can defeat it." Commander Alice Trent stood on the bridge of the horizon, looking out at the systems under human protection. Her smile was calm, confident, and steady. She had not ordered attacks, she had not demanded revenge, and yet humanity's message was clear. Strength was not in weapons alone, it was in choice, in restraint, in the ability to act with purpose and protect others. Clara Finch, standing beside her, watched the Council fleets withdrawing from previously occupied human systems. "It's remarkable," she said softly. "They expected war and we gave them protection. They expected panic and we gave them patience. And now, they understand." Alice turned to her officer, her smile steady. "They understand, yes. But more importantly, they have learned something they will never forget. Humans are not bound by fear. Humans are not bound by aggression. Humans are bound by choice. And a species that cannot be forced to conquer, cannot be defeated." The galaxy, once tense and uncertain, began to breathe again. Neutral systems were stabilized. Civilian populations were safe. The council was fractured, its members questioning their own actions, their own assumptions, their own strategies. And through it all, human fleets moved quietly, deliberately, protecting rather than destroying, demonstrating that true power did not come from conquest, but from understanding, unity, and deliberate choice. Commander Alice Trent finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Her smile, so often misinterpreted as arrogance, was now clear to all who observed. It was not a smile of pride or revenge. It was a smile of confidence, the quiet confidence of a species that did not need to conquer to be strong, a species that understood patience, strategy, and the value of choice. And in that moment, humanity had turned the tables. Not with brute force, not with violence, not with threats, but with quiet, deliberate action. With protection. With patience. With principle. The Council had declared war. Humanity had smiled. And in doing so, it had won not by attack but by showing the galaxy the power of a species that chose when to fight, and when to protect. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was a quiet unlike any it had known before. The hum of fleets and the chatter of colonies had returned, not as the anxious noise of conflict, but as the steady rhythm of a universe learning to breathe again. Humans moved among the stars not as conquerors, not as rulers, not as tyrants, but as partners, partners chosen, trusted, and respected by the many species that had once considered them a threat. Commander Alice Trent stood on the observation deck of the horizon, her hands resting lightly on the railing. The stars stretched endlessly before her, each one a distant sun, each one a world with its own story. She had watched humanity endure, adapt, and emerge from a war that had never truly been a war in the traditional sense. And she had seen the galaxy change in response to human patience, restraint, and intelligence. Lieutenant Clara Finch approached her quietly, glancing at the stars with Alice. "It's strange," Clara said softly, "to see so much peace after so much tension. I expected relief, but this is more than that. It feels like understanding." Alice smiled faintly, her gaze steady. "Understanding is exactly what we wanted, Clara. Not just from our own people but from the galaxy. Humans have learned that control is not the same as strength. Influence is not the same as dominance. And patience is more powerful than fear." Below them, the human fleets patrolled the borders of neutral systems, their presence reassuring rather than threatening. Colonies that had once been vulnerable were now stable and prosperous. Trade routes hummed with activity. Diplomatic channels flowed with cooperation. The galaxy had learned to trust humanity, not because humans demanded it but because humans had proven themselves worthy of that trust. In one sector, a species called the Illyrin had sent a delegation to thank the humans personally. The Illyrin were small, bird-like beings with bright feathers and delicate voices, known for their cautious nature. "Your species has taught us something we did not understand," said the Illyrin ambassador. "That power is not always in weapons or numbers. It is in choice, in restraint, in knowing when to act and when to wait. We will remember this lesson." Alice nodded, watching the ambassador depart. "We have always understood that, Clara. That is why humans endure. That is why humans survive. And that is why the galaxy now seeks us as partners, not rulers." Meanwhile, the remnants of the council convened to assess the new reality. Some members were bitter, some confused, and some, quietly, were respectful. The species that had once sought to crush humanity now found themselves in a position they had never imagined, needing allies rather than enemies, seeking guidance rather than issuing commands. Milo Grant, now returned to diplomatic service, observed the council with quiet satisfaction. He had been a voice of explanation, a bridge between humans and the galaxy, and his work had helped shape the understanding that had allowed the legacy of this conflict to become one of cooperation rather than conquest. On the bridge of the horizon, Alice watched the movement of human fleets and the peaceful activity in the colonies. She thought of the path humanity had taken, from hiding, patience, and subtle influence, to the confident display of protection and restraint, to the present, where the galaxy looked to humans not in fear but in respect. Clara Finch spoke again, her voice quiet. "Do you ever wonder if they will ever fully understand us? Or if they will always measure us by the way others fight?" Alice turned to her, eyes steady and calm. "Some may never fully understand, Clara. But that is not the point. Humans do not fight to be understood. We fight to survive. We act to protect. We endure to prove that we do not need domination to be strong. That alone is enough." As the days turned into weeks, humans continued to operate across the galaxy. They shared knowledge, assisted with technology, helped mediate disputes, and provided protection where it was needed. No species felt compelled to submit, and none were forced into allegiance. Humans were not rulers. They were partners, chosen freely, valued for their strength, intelligence, and the wisdom of their restraint. Alice often reflected on what had made the difference. It was not the ships, though humanity had many. It was not the weapons, though they were formidable. It was the understanding of timing, the courage to wait, the patience to act only when it mattered. That was the true legacy of humanity in the galaxy. The knowledge that a species that controls its own choices can never truly be defeated. One evening, as the twin suns of a neutral planet set in brilliant colors, Alice stood alone on the observation deck, watching the horizon. The colors of the sky reminded her of Earth, of home, and of all that humans had endured to reach this moment. She felt the weight of history, of responsibility, and of the path humanity had carved among the stars. Clara joined her quietly, noticing the expression on Alice's face. "Thinking about the future?" she asked. Alice smiled faintly. "Yes. About what comes next. About the legacy we leave. Humans have proven that strength is not about taking. It is about choosing. And sometimes, the greatest strength of all is knowing when to walk away." Clara tilted her head. "Walk away? From what?" Alice's eyes focused on a distant star, glowing faintly in the darkness. "From conflicts that do not matter. From control that is not needed. From fear and aggression. The most dangerous species is not the one that can dominate. It is the one that knows when to step back, when to let others act, and when to protect only what truly matters. That is humans. That is our legacy." Below, human ships moved in quiet harmony, fleets crossing sectors without alarm or threat. Civilian colonies prospered. Trade routes thrived. Neutral species no longer feared the humans. They sought them willingly, inviting them into councils, alliances, and partnerships. Humans had shown that power without arrogance, strength without aggression, and patience without weakness could reshape the galaxy itself. Alice turned back to Clara, her smile steady. "We do not need to rule. We do not need to conquer. The galaxy now sees what humans have always known. We act with purpose. We choose our battles. We protect our own and we respect others. That choice is our greatest weapon." Clara nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Alice's words. "So our victory isn't measured in battle or conquest. It's measured in respect." Alice looked at her young officer, eyes bright. "Exactly. Respect, trust, and understanding. Humans have created a galaxy where choice matters more than fear, where partners are sought willingly, and where strength is shown by wisdom, not aggression. That is our legacy. That is the story we leave behind." As the stars twinkled in the endless night, Alice Trent whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, "The most dangerous species is not the one that controls, but the one that knows when to walk away." Clara Finch placed a hand gently on her commander's shoulder. "And humanity knows that." Alice's eyes returned to the horizon, calm and confident. "Yes, Clara. Humanity knows that." The galaxy moved on, but the story of humans endured. Across sectors and star systems, species remembered the patience, the restraint, and the quiet power of a species that had faced war, not with fury but with understanding. The humans had shown that survival was not about domination but about choice. That true strength came from knowing when to act, and when to stand aside. And in every corner of space, from the smallest trading post to the largest council chamber, the lesson remained clear. Humans were not rulers but partners. They were not conquerors but protectors. They were not to be feared for their aggression, but respected for their wisdom. Humanity's legacy was written in the stars, in every alliance forged, every life protected, and every moment of patience endured. And Commander Alice Trent, gazing into the infinite expanse, knew that the galaxy had learned something far greater than victory or defeat. It had learned the quiet, enduring power of a species that acted with understanding, patience, and choice, the power of humanity.